farmers, fishers, and tribal communities for food security, nutrition, and health. So it's my pleasure to welcome the chair and co-chair and the speakers of the session. So I would like to welcome the chair of the session, Professor Lindiwe Sibanda, to the stage. Please, ma'am, welcome you on stage. Yeah. Next, I would like to invite the co-chair of the session, Professor Nitya Rao. Welcome, Dr. Nitya Rao. Next, I would like to welcome our speaker, Srimadi Uma Mahadevan Dasgupta. Welcome, ma'am, to the stage. Our next speaker is Dr. Nikita Gopal. I would like to welcome Dr. Nikita Gopal onto the stage. Our third speaker is Professor Nitya Rao, who is our co-chair. And the next speaker is Mrs. Vanilla. I would like to welcome Mrs. Vanilla onto the stage. Please come. And the last speaker, Dr. Vijay Kumar Mani. I would like to welcome Dr. Vijay Kumar Mani to the stage. I would like to give a brief intro to the chair of the session, Professor Lindiwe Sibanda. She is a leading animal scientist and farmer, has made significant strides in agriculture and policy. She earned her BSc in animal production from the University of Alexandria, Egypt, and her MSc and PhD in agriculture from the University of Reading, UK. Currently, she serves on the Nestle board, chairs the council at the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, and is an extraordinary professor at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. She is an associate fellow at Chatham House and a member of Champions 12.3, focusing on reducing global food waste in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. Welcome, ma'am. Yeah. And the next, I would like to introduce the co-chair, Professor Nitya Rao, who is the chair and also one of the speakers of this session. Co-chair and one of the speakers of this session. Dr. Nitya Rao is a professor and gender and development at the University of East Anglia, United Kingdom, and director of the NISD. She has worked as a researcher and advocate in the field of women's rights, gendered well-being, and justice, with a focus on food, nutrition, health, and livelihood security. She has consistently engaged with policy and practice at both the global and local levels. She is currently Commissioner, EAT Lancet 2 on Healthy and Sustainable Diets, member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the United Nations Food Systems Coordination Hub, member of the UKRI International Strategic Advisory Group, and external advisor, People-Centered Food Systems Project at Columbia University. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you. Now I hand over the session to the chair of the session, Professor Lindiwe Sibanda.
Good afternoon. Welcome to a special session on special people. This is special because we are taking the charge that our dear MS gave to us, which is empower women, empower the youth, empower smallholder farmers, fisheries, and tribal communities for food security, nutrition, and good health. There can't be a better session than this one. We are hoping during this session to make special emphasis on how we can uplift women and youth, especially those from marginalized areas. We'll also deliberate on the challenges that they face. We want to ensure their participation in economic and social development. Furthermore, We're going to look at creating conducive policy environment, special programs, and initiatives that are aimed at empowering these sections of society nationally. Without further ado, I'd like to first thank my co-chair, who is also a speaker in this session, and the session coordinators and rapporteurs for putting together this important session. Without further ado, allow me to move straight to our first speaker, Madam Uma Dasgupta, who is going to speak to us for 10 minutes. This is fire speed for all of us, 10 minutes, and we want to spend more time in the discussions so that you are all empowered. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor and privilege to be participating in this conference, which is in honor of Professor M.S. Swaminathan's very powerful and great vision of a hunger-free world. It's a vision for India and it's a vision for the world. I also congratulate MSSRF for carrying forward this important work. My presentation today is actually not as a researcher, but as a practitioner and as somebody who has tried to devise and design policies which work on the ground. And my presentation actually harks back not directly to M.S. Swaminathan's vision, but to Meena Swaminathan's work, which placed young children at the heart of our communities. I'm talking about the ICDS, which is possibly the most complex program that we're running in India today. As a practitioner, I'm going to give a very plain vanilla presentation about what I think is possibly the lowest hanging fruit for us to work on an existing project which has the potential, with some work and with some additional inputs and enrichment from all of us, to become a very powerful way for us to empower the youngest of our communities. India has 1.4 million Anganwadi centers, and 2.8 million women's livelihoods are tied up with these Anganwadi centers. These Anganwadi centers actually cater to have a reach of 50 million young children, children below the age of 6, between 3 and 6 who attend Anganwadis, and children below 3 who get their growth monitoring, their health convergence and all of that. Also reaching out to pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers. As we all know, some of us might have forgotten, but it's worth remembering that it was Meena Swaminathan's report which actually led to the formation and the scale-up of ICDS across the country. A year and a half ago, Sanjay Kaul and I were fortunate enough to be part of a new ECCA task force set up by the Government of India, where we focused on the next 20 or 30 years, what ICDS should do, which is actually build on what has already been done, but also expand focus to early nutrition, early stimulation, health convergence, immunization, growth monitoring, and women's workforce participation. All of this is part of what ICDS can do. This is actually a slide from the World Development Report, which we used not only to show to policymakers in Karnataka, but also to Anganwadi workers across the state when we took up a program of maternal nutrition, to show them what we were literally talking about was the difference between the cognitive development of a stunted child and a well-nourished child. And therefore, it's very important to get the ICDS to remember its core principle of being data-driven and evidence-based. Solid foundations, as I've already said, ICDS is a complex program. It has many moving parts, all of which have to work at the same time, some of which get neglected. It focuses on nutrition. They're often dismissed as feeding centers, but feeding is what we do. and that's important, and that's what young children need to start with. It also includes immunization and health checkups and growth monitoring, all of which needs to be done regularly, precisely, and transparently if we are to achieve any change in our malnutrition and stunting rates. It most importantly includes play-based early childhood education, which includes stimulation but also includes joyful learning activities, all of which actually have to happen in the Anganwadis because we're talking about 1.4 million centers and several million young children. What can be done? This is something I often tell young practitioners, young colleagues of my own, that there are gaps. We recognize that there are gaps in the last 40 years, but we can get the basics right and we can augment capacities. Just to give you some of the examples, we can focus on expanding and ensuring that all Anganwadis have buildings. MG Narega is a great convergence program which allows us to spend 8 lakhs on every Anganwadi building. And therefore, it should be possible to build Anganwadi buildings because they are actually the foundation of a safe and hygienic early learning environment. It should also be possible to increase working hours. These might seem like very simple solutions to complex problems, but actually these are where the solutions are. If women have to be able to go out to work, knowing that their child is being safely looked after, then those working hours need to be increased. In Karnataka, we have increased the working hours to 6.5 hours. Working conditions of Anganwadi workers. Our carers are people who actually have to have less stress on their minds and be less desperate in terms of their remuneration and their working conditions if they are to care for young children with the kind of warmth and affection that's required. Working conditions, there are simple solutions which can be implemented, like online applications which reduce harassment while selection and so on. Food. Diversity in the diet, including eggs in the Anganwadi children's meal, is straight away a low-cost and high-value solution, which not only allows the children to get quality protein, but also allows women's self-help groups locally to become the producers and suppliers of these eggs. And therefore, this, again, with converging with MG Narega and with the self-help group program, becomes a source of livelihoods. Diversity in diets also should be looked at. Eggs, milk, chickpeas, sprouts, green leafy vegetables, all of which I'm happy to say are being given in Anganwadis in Karnataka and many other states. Training, an important component that we forget. Training in ensuring that there is an SOP, it is followed, children are being looked after, there is a way to greet them at the entrance, there is a way to send them off at the end of the day. These are actually the basic building blocks of our program. And this is something that I urge all of us who are interested in ensuring that young children have a good foundation in life to work on. I've listed a bunch of things that can be done. Just to give you some examples, operationalizing all Anganwadis. 1.4 million have actually been approved, but many districts still have 10 or 15% of their Anganwadis, which might yet not be operational. And that's the lowest hanging fruit. Own buildings, Kacha buildings to be converted into Pakka buildings, electricity connections. Again, these seem like such small and foundational and basic interventions. But while I was in the department, 15,000 Anganwadis, we managed to give electricity connections because of High Court order. And that ensures that those Anganwadis not only have lights, but they also have functioning fans, which means that there's ventilation, there's clean air flowing through. These are extremely basic interventions that actually should be done only one time. And then the Anganwadi becomes a foundation for better early development. And, you know, one can go on. Functioning toilets, drinking water, compound walls for safety, play areas that are high safety, low maintenance, ventilation I've already spoken about. MG Narega for nutrition gardens. We had a delicious moringa soup this afternoon. We should have moringa everywhere where we can, because a bunch of moringa leaves in the dal or the sambar of the Anganwadi child is and for pregnant women, for breastfeeding mothers, for the adolescent girls, is something that's going to add to their nutrition going ahead. Cooking gas. I'd like to mention just very quickly about what we did when we said that we wanted Anganwadis in Karnataka not only to serve hot food to children, but also to pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers who were otherwise getting dry rations. So we said that what was happening with dry rations was that it was either getting pilfered, or it was of uneven quality, or it was getting shared at home, or even if in the best case scenario, it actually got consumed by the mother, she was not getting enough of it because the amount was very small. At the time when we started, this was 2017, it was 7 rupees per head per day. We multiplied it by 3 from the state, adding 14 rupees from the state resources, and we said every woman will be entitled to a hot meal which is cooked in the Anganwadi. 21 rupees was the cost of the meal, and that would have an egg, it would have a glass of milk, it would have chikki, dal, GLVs, and so on. But the question was, now there was additional work for the Anganwadi worker and the helper. So when we visited Anganwadis and talked to the workers, they themselves gave us a solution. They said, we have single burner stoves. Give us double burner stoves, give us an additional pressure cooker, and give us an additional gas cylinder. I think that was one of the most eye-opening experiences that I had as a civil servant, because here was a solution being co-produced for us, with us. And that was very moving. Many more things that can be done. I won't go into the details, but as they say, God is in these details. These are, details like foam mats, details like washable mats, so that you ensure hygiene. These are not the details that many of our practitioners or administrators actually like to get their hands dirty with, but these details actually make a difference. And convergence allows us, convergence of Panchayat funds, Finance Commission funds, MP lads, MLA lads funds, CSR. Convergence allows us to actually make much more out of every rupee than we actually do. And this is important. We heard earlier in the day about the last mile. I actually feel that the panchayats and the Anganwadis can regard every child and every mother at the first mile, because the last mile is a metaphor that we get from telecommunications. But at the first mile, with whatever they need. If there is a child with a disability, what does that child need? If there is a pregnant woman facing domestic violence at home, what does she need? That's what the first mile can do. And that's where panchayats, Anganwadis, self-help groups coming together can actually make a difference. Again, a bunch of solutions which I've just suggested. I don't need to go into all of this because none of you all are practitioners. This is something that I actually tell young officers on the ground. But in general, another approach that I have found works in reaching and empowering communities is to use motivation rather than monitoring of frontline workers and community workers. Makes a huge difference. This is a picture I wanted to show about how it's not just direct nutrition interventions, but actually the working conditions. This is literally a picture of the double burner gas stove and the additional pressure cooker, which I'm happy to say is now available in all the Anganwadis in Karnataka, but also numbers. The fact that we can do things at scale. We need to do things at scale and can do it at scale because MG Narega allows us. Toilets can be built at scale. Electricity connections can be done at scale. Water connections can be done at scale because panchayats are charging a health cess. All it requires is actually to put together the pieces of the puzzle. And also community ownership. How do we build community ownership? Because we do talk a lot about community ownership, but how it actually happens in practice is, I've struggled with it over the years, but I find that the governance structure of the panchayat and the governance structure of the Anganwadi committee, which is a subcommittee of the panchayat. That's the one that works best because there are mothers, there are fathers, there are even grandmothers of children, and there are the Anganwadi and Asha workers. And inclusion to prevent the exclusion of the poorest is something that can only happen at this level. We were just talking, Dr. Bharti and I were just talking earlier this morning about how convergence is very difficult. It's very difficult the higher we go, the levels that we have to cross. But on the ground, convergence yields the greatest value. Community leadership for nutrition, a life cycle approach, taking this to the heart of the community can address all these problems. The hot meal program that we started was actually evaluated by PHFI, and we found that hot meals for mothers reduced anemia, increased birth weight, increased gestational weight gain, and also increased mental wellness of mothers. Anganwadi work is at the heart of the community, also addresses not just the young children, also addresses issues of teenage pregnancy, teenage marriage, creates social networks for resilience against domestic violence. I mean, I could go on, but I think we all know. Additionally, what we need to do is creches for children below the age of 3. And this is something that in Karnataka we have tried. We've done 4,000 of these at panchayat level, not advocating for additional funds from the state. So I'll end with this thought that what was the theme of the 20th century was actually school education. The theme of the 21st century should actually be early childhood development if we are to empower communities for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's heartening to hear a chief secretary to government talking about simple interventions for high impact. Thank you very much for those lessons. Even more, thank you so much for bringing Mom, Meena Swaminathan, to the room. She championed this cause, and we should not forget. Thank you. I'm now going to change gear and ask my speakers to use the other podium, because when they are this side, they ignore me. Our next speaker for 10 minutes is Dr. Nikita Gopal, who is the chair of the Gender in Aquaculture and Fisheries section of the Asian Fisheries Society and division head of ICA GIFT. Over to you, Madam, 10 minutes.
Computer is here. The computer is here. Yeah, the system is here, so sorry, I'm not taking your suggestion and speaking from here. Very honored to be here with humble pranams to the memory of Professor Swaminathan, sir. I'll keep it to 10 minutes. I'll share some of the experiences after such a wonderful first talk. I'll share some of the experiences of two organizations that I represent here. One is the Gender in Aquaculture and Fisheries section, and the other is the ICR Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, where I'm currently working. I'll be basically talking about fisheries-based livelihoods, which are models that we've worked with, which ultimately ensure food and livelihood security. GAFS actually has been built on a platform of workshops, symposium, conferences. We have started small, but we are now a strong voice. We have taken it forward with several network meetings, and we have sort of formalized our section in 2017. We've been constantly engaging with other organizations to further the cause of gender equity and inclusion, and we have of late been actively engaged in projects which look at gender inclusion and other aspects in fisheries and aquaculture. This is some of the pictures of our growth and our milestones. Some of the recent projects that we've been doing is one with the Nature Conservatory, where we're looking at gender equity in freshwater fisheries. We're doing a scan of the issues and the gaps. And we heard a lot of talk of nature-based climate solutions, but we are also looking at developing monitoring schemas for making these nature-based solutions more gender responsive, because we ultimately talk of indicators but don't so much talk of the process and how women are either included or excluded from the whole process. We have also been actively furthering the inclusion of youth, elderly and indigenous groups, which are generally frequently overlooked when we talk of policy and programs in fisheries and aquaculture. We also engage with other agencies, as I mentioned, and we partner with the CAFE SSF for implementation of suitable financial service to support small-scale fishers and aquaculture producers. This is just a brief of the work that we do in GAF, and the efforts and work continues for furthering our agenda of greater gender equity and inclusion in fisheries and aquaculture sector. In institutional interventions, I work in the Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, which basically works on sustainable harvesting and total utilization of fishery resources through innovations in harvest and post-harvest technology. So these are the two pillars of our institute. We have a strong liaison with the industry. Also, we have a very strong history of engagement with the community, where we do technology assessment, testing, and evaluation. These are some of the technologies that we have, and we also have a strong agribusiness incubation center where we assist prospective entrepreneurs, where we give proactive value-added business support. The modes and models that we generally use are, one is capacity building that was mentioned by Uma ma'am too. We have active facility creation and input provision, and we work on project mode. And we have strong linkages with local institutions to do all these. So some of the the capacity building, we have regular capacity building programs for fishers. We also have special programs under the action plans for Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, and for the northeastern regions. And we also do a lot of student training. In facility creation, we focus on giving technology inputs for fishing and for fish processing. And we have also projects that are funded by national and international agencies. These are some of the programs that we've done last year. We had about 97 programs under the special component scheme for Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes, and for the northeastern region, where we have almost reached 2,637. These are direct people we have reached directly, and we work, as I mentioned, very closely in association with local organizations, be it KVKs or Department of Fisheries. And we've reached places where people don't usually go. For instance, the program that we did in Campbell Bay in Andaman and Nicobar last year had a lot of impact. So in projects in general, this is the model that we follow. We have we standardize the technology. We go for clustering, capacity building, facility creation, and hand holding. So we've done. These are just pictures of 5 projects that we have done in Kerala and in Gujarat. So we work with the local, either the cooperative society or the panchayat or any other organization that's willing to work with us in these areas. So our model has generally been that we work with women forming post-harvest activity clusters or self-help groups. We train them and we see that business models are developed to cater to the demand for value-added fish products in those areas that they belong to. In the first example, this was not very successful because we had issues, internal and external issues, basically operational issues, where raw material availability is one issue, and they had a poor capacity to imbibe risk. So this is one area which has been often overlooked, whether it is credit or operational capital, or whether their capability to respond to market shifts. But we still feel that it's a workable model because management of these risks is possible. And the positives is this convergence of institutional efforts, because R&D, local government, fisher groups, etc., if they converge, that is also what the previous speakers also were speaking about, things will work. And then basically in these models, in these projects that we saw, was we were anticipating family resistance, but then generally when there is income and there is some standing in community happening, the families tend to be supportive. And if sustained, these can bring in steady incomes. So this is another example where we partnered with the society again for women in dry fish production. This was basically an adaptive strategy during COVID. But they have several other issues like lack of technology interventions. But they are actually now marketing on a slightly larger scale than they were doing earlier, because they have linked up with an institutional buyer. But still, technology remained sort of what they were doing earlier, but they didn't want the technology that we were providing to them, that was the dryers, because they didn't have space, because the coastal areas were heavily thickly populated, and they didn't have space to keep these dryers, and they had operational difficulties. So along with them, we have developed this small foldable drying racks which they can store away very easily after they use it for drying. So as I said, again, groups will work if there is convergence of institutional efforts, building capacities, and engaging for co-creating of solutions. That's also what came about in the previous talk, that we really need to understand what they need, and they have their own, they have several solutions which they can give, which we can use for implementation and developing of technology. This is again a dryer which this again was successful because we had a local cooperative bank supporting them for establishing the unit as well as for sort of marketing. This is again a work with clam fishermen. Clam is a sedentary animal, and this is around 250 families. This is in a small island in the Vembanad estuary. So we had about 250 families working in this clam fishery with very sort of traditional and unhygienic conditions, especially for the women. So we had secured some fund from the DST, and we worked with the local panchayat and the youth club in this village. But the challenge was to navigate the political issues in that village, which necessitated several rounds of discussions to resolve, which we finally managed to do. And this is the system that we implemented there, where we had a customized depuration system, which was designed and set up with their inputs, mechanized shucking and mechanical meat cell separation, which was all done physically by the women there, and it involved a lot of drudgery. We tried some product diversification, and there are some groups that are now doing this. So these are some of the pictures of the activities, and then this is the unit that has been set up and which is functional. So some of the pictures of that, and they have eventually formed an FFPO of the clam fishers in that area. So we also work with the Siddhi tribal and the Karwa community in Veeraval in Gujarat. The model that we followed was the same, and even there they have eventually formed an FFPO now. So some of the lessons learned is that groups work. I'm a strong believer in groups. They work if we can manage the group dynamics and intersectionalities. And the model is essentially that we should have convergence of institutions, whether it is technology, governance, policy, or supporting institutions like credit and markets. We need stakeholder involvement right from the beginning for assessment of issues and for developing the solutions. Building capacities, that is where we can come in, enhance what there is already there and create what there isn't. And then we have to follow up by hand-holding and technology input and market support. So I think it's just about time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nikita Gopal. I didn't mean to scare you to rush through, but thank you for those key messages, very clear, from farm, the water, to fork, through capacity building, education, processing, value addition, and making sure that the quality that lands on the plate is good enough and safe for consumption. Thank you for the highlights on the initiatives you serve. We now move on to our third 10-minute presentation, where Professor Nitya Rao, who is Professor of Gender and Development at the University of East Anglia in the UK, is going to address us. Over to you, Nitya.
Thank you. It's come. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll try and stick to 10 minutes as well. So I think thanks to both Uma and Nikita for excellent presentations. And I wanted to sort of maybe pull back a little bit into conceptual. I think in the earlier session, Dr. Darshan Shankar, you had raised the issue of social justice and equity. And I think I want to pick up a little bit on what I have learned from work in the field, including with MSSRF, on gender justice and to move towards a hunger-free world and what can be the sort of components of that. And I think this is a quote, of course, I think in the morning also we heard a little bit about Gandhiji, some people were saying, but I think my father also felt that, a true measure of society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And I think you said that at the start, that this panel has a very important role in really looking at who are these most vulnerable members. So I will also speak about focusing mainly on gender equality. And of course, there has been a lot of progress globally. We have had various conferences since 1975 onwards, and much progress has been made. The SDGs have a gender equality goal, but still, despite the global sort of rhetoric or narrative, there is a lot of gap that still remains, including in India. I think we have, I think Uma, you said that the last century was for the school education or primary education, and now it's for early childhood. But also I think that the primary education problem might have been solved, but the early childhood and the secondary still remains a problem. Secondary and higher education, especially for vulnerable groups, not just girls, but equally indigenous communities, fisher communities, and so on. The health and nutrition problem has remained a persistent one. So despite all the growth in India, our health and nutrition figures haven't improved at all, according to the Global Gender Gap report, but all the various global reports that are coming up, which often get very controversial, because we feel that we've improved, but actually our figures are not moving. I think the FAO report noted some years back, 10 years back, that 20 to 30% of the gap in agricultural productivity is actually a gender gap. And if we close the gender gap in terms of returns to labor, so giving equal wages, recognizing women's work, in terms of land, I think Schengen spoke about land and land tenures and land rights and so on for women in the morning. I think that remains a problem in India as well. And also lower levels of financial inclusion. Perhaps it is changing, like Uma mentioned, that now there are possibilities for convergence. And I think in states like Karnataka, where we have dynamic, there's a lot of variation across India in terms of financial inclusion of women. I think what has happened perhaps with all this progress that has been made is, or maybe it's reporting, but of course we find very high backlash in terms of high rates of gender-based violence. This worsens in a changing climate. Soumya in the morning mentioned the report that MSSRF has just done on the impacts of climate change on women and children. And I think when we look at global evidence, and this was from the Global Gender and Climate Alliance, that they reviewed 130 studies, and 2/3 showed that the women were worse affected than men. Of course, not across all indicators. So in something like infectious disease, you find men worse affected than women. This could partly be because of migration, because of working in, not very good or safe conditions, those who are migrating from the most vulnerable groups. So I think just 4 key points that I wanted to make, that when we look in the context of environmental degradation and climate change, of course it has sector-specific effects, but it on different crops, on different forests, on different varieties and so on. It also has gender-specific effects. So declining soil fertility or soil erosion or rainfall variability can affect the yields of some crops. In some areas, we have, of course, in Africa, it's much better written about than in South Asia. But here too, you have the divisions of labor across different crops, and control and access to different crops vary in terms of something is seen as a food crop. Rice may be a male crop, whereas millets may be much more of a female crop, for instance. And climate change then shifts these patterns. What we find happening in India, as I had already referred to, is that men are migrating out, particularly of the tribal pockets, which have become very vulnerable to climate change. And this is also leading to shifts in cropping patterns. This is from Koraput, the site where MSSRF works, actually the whole central Indian tribal belt, where the paper industry has really taken over a large part of the share for eucalyptus plantations, leading to a loss of both biodiversity, water depletion, but also loss of that land for growing a range of subsistence, pulses, grams, vegetables, and so on. So the four things that I wanted to point to from a gender perspective. One is that when land use changes, it also leads to differential gender impacts in terms of control over assets. So in this example that I just gave from Koraput, that when land moves to the paper industry, the contracts are signed with the men who are the land title owners. Earlier, women were using that land for growing millets, but also for growing horse gram and vegetables. Now that is gone. This means they have lost not just food, but also income, because some of these crops they could also sell in the weekly market for small pots of money, the surplus production on a rotating basis, on a continuous basis. Now that is gone. The control over land has also gone. The second thing is the devaluation of women's labor, which I mentioned. I think we did a time use study, and this has been now after the Beijing Women's Conference in 1995. The time use studies were sort of supported, but this is very political. So not many governments have actually done time use surveys. These are more smaller scale surveys, but what they do show is how the time use is changing. And this was from one of the things which we did with an MSSRA project, LANSA, that of the total work, using the Government of India methodology, that 56% of the total work was being done by women. Out of that, almost 80% of agricultural work was done by women, and plus 95% of the domestic and care work. And most of women's work is unpaid, labor intensive, and with very low levels of control. The time deficits for care were particularly intensive for women from landless and marginal farming households. Nikita mentioned intersectionality. So we cannot take all women as one group, but also we look at different categories of women. And we found there that for the poorest women, there was almost a 30% decline in planting and harvesting seasons, which directly affected cooking. So even though there may be food grains at home, there was no time for cooking, and it led to ultra-processed or cheaply available foods like 2-minute noodles or something else, which has implications for nutrition outcomes, but also for child care and for stagnating child nutrition outcomes. In fact, you mentioned about the extension of Anganwadi to 6.5 hours. And I think this is a very good demand we should make at the national level, because if the children can be regularly fed for that 6.5 hours when mothers are working, I think we can also address the problem of time poverty of women. The third thing is knowledge, and I think we've spoken a lot about knowledge, that a lot of the agricultural extension is still coming in a top-down related to particular crops. I think this has been the nature of our agriculture system. We talk about rice, or we talk about maize, or we talk about wheat, or we talk about particular crops rather than as a system-based approach. And I think Schengen mentioned that we really need to take a food systems approach, which some of our agricultural extension agencies are not able to take up. And this is where I think the combination with local, traditional, indigenous, whatever we want to call it, because they did focus on a diversity of crops within their limited land. So my father always used to say that even if you have 1 acre of land, the farmer is always thinking about both subsistence and self-consumption, but also for market. So there was always a combination of crops, even within a small, and this was the traditional knowledge as well. And this has kind of shifted. And with that, women's knowledge. And the fourth thing, I think, of indebtedness, especially with COVID, we saw very high levels of indebtedness, which had gendered effects, because women were selling off their assets, especially gold or other kinds of assets, in order to bring migrant men home or to support the family, to support education, and so on. So they've been active in farmers' protests and things like that. I won't go, how much time? 1 minute, too much into that. But I think what the government has done is, as you said, they have recognized some of the reproductive tasks of women, which is good, like water, LPG cylinders, and so on. But what we have not made progress with is recognizing women as farmers and their productive role as farmers, even though they are taking 80% of that. So just very quickly, I want to summarize what were the strategies. I think one of the things is that we need to focus equally, and other speakers have said it, not just on the diversity of the food system, but also on the social environment. I think in the morning, Krishna Bairagoda from Karnataka made 2 very important points about farmers' welfare and the social environment, but also the institutional environment I think we have been talking about. Frontier technologies for knowledge. I think really to empower women with knowledge, with new skills to reduce drudgery is very key for sustaining food systems. Recognizing farmers' rights. This is a picture from the MSSRF, some of their work and their data set. I think it's from Wayanad about the multiple varieties of yams and tubers, which women actually have the knowledge about, but very few of them, 19 local varieties, less than 5 are in rural markets and none are in urban. So we really don't know about this, and finally building women's leadership on the ground. I just wanted to sort of try to put it together into what might be in the green box, the 5 principles or the 5 R's, if you like, that we need to think about in terms of a sustainable and a gender-just world. I think some are well known, which have come from social theorists like Nancy Fraser, in terms of recognition of rights, in terms of redistribution of resources, in terms of representation and voice. But 2 more, I think, are very important. One is we really need to focus on time poverty and reduction in drudgery of labor. And the final one, I think, is on reciprocity or reciprocal social relations, that we can't, put all the responsibility and all the work only on women or whichever is the marginalized group. I think we do need to find ways in which other people can cooperate, especially men. I just came back from Chettinadu 2 days ago, and actually in Pudukkottai district in Tamil Nadu, they now say that all the work, farm, off-farm, non-farm, is done by women. The men have either migrated or the men are basically having liquor and not active in the labor force. So I think we really need to invest in also developing reciprocal social relations. I think when I talk about gender justice or gender equality, it includes everybody in society, not just women, but also we need to get men on board to support this process and move us forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rao. I'm not going to summarize because it's your job to summarize as my co-chair. But I just want to say what I take away is that we need social justice, more so now during a time where we are facing climate change. We need to work on those 5 R's and make sure we remove the burden or double burden that our women are now facing in the face of climate change. Thank you very much. We go on to speaker number 4, Ms. Venila, Tribal Women Representative, Collie Hills, Tamil Nadu. Thank you, Madam. 10 minutes. Can come this side.
வேளாண் விஞ்ஞானி பசுமை புரட்சியின் தந்தை MS சுவாமிநாதன் ஐயா அவர்களை வணங்கி இங்கே கூடியிருக்கும் அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். என்னுடைய பேர் வெண்ணிலா, கொல்லிமலை ஆலத்தூர் நாடு நாமக்கல் மாவட்டத்திலிருந்து இங்கே வந்திருக்கேன். எங்கள் பகுதியில் MS சுவாமிநாதன் ஆராய்ச்சி நிறுவனம் பெருசாக என்ன பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கு அப்படின்னா, இளம் தலைமுறையினர் பெண்களை எல்லாம் ஒருங்கிணைத்து மகளிர் சுய உதவிக்குழுவாக ஆரம்பித்து அவருடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்திற்காக சேமிப்பு கணக்கை துவங்கி உள்கடன் எடுத்து கொடுக்கறது, பேங்க்கில் போயிட்டு பேங்க் லோன் அவங்களுக்கு வாங்கி கொடுக்கறது, இந்த மாதிரியான வேலைகள் எல்லாம் செஞ்சுட்டு வந்துட்டுருக்கேன். இதோட கூட விதை வங்கி ஆரம்பிச்சிருக்கோம். ஒவ்வொரு பகுதியிலையும் விதை வங்கி இருக்குது. கொல்லிமலையில் விதை வங்கியில் அங்கே இருக்கிற விவசாயிகளுக்கு தரமான விதைகளை அங்கே என்னென்ன மகசூலெல்லாம் நல்லா விளைச்சல் வருதோ அந்தந்த விதைகளை அவங்களுக்கு கொடுத்து இரட்டிப்பாக பெற்று திரும்பவும் விதை வங்கியிலேயே பாதுகாப்பாக வைத்திருக்கோம். அதை எப்படி முறையாக விவசாயம் செய்யணும் அப்படிங்கிறதே இளம் தலைமுறையினருக்கு அங்கே பணி செய்கிற பணி செய்கிற ஸ்டாஃபுங்கெல்லாம் வருவாங்க. அங்கே அதில் எப்படி கேழ்வரகு விதைக்கிறதுக்கு வரிசை முறையில் விதைக்கிறதுக்காக சீடர் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. அதை களை எடுக்கிறதுக்கு த்ரெஷரு, மருந்தடிக்கிறதுக்கு எல்லாமே கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. அதை பெண்களுடைய வேலையை குறைக்கிறதுக்காகவும் இதெல்லாம் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. இவங்க இதெல்லாம் சாப்பிட்டது போக இதில் வரக்கூடிய கேழ்வரகாக இருக்கட்டும், சாமை, திணை, கம்பு, இதெல்லாமே வீட்டு உபயோகத்திற்கு போக மீதம் உள்ளதை சந்தைப்படுத்துறதுக்காக எங்கள் பகுதியில் உழவர் உற்பத்தியாளர் கம்பெனி அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு 1034 உறுப்பினர்களை கொண்டு ஒரு கம்பெனி ஆரம்பிச்சிருக்கோம். அந்த கம்பெனியில் இங்கே விளையக்கூடிய விளைபொருட்களை மதிப்பு கூட்டு வகையில் பொருளை தயார் செய்து அதை வந்து சந்தைப்படுத்தி நேரடி வியாபாரத்தை அவங்களுக்கு சரியான விலையை அவங்களுக்கு விற்பனை செய்து அவங்களுக்கு கொடுக்குறோம். இதில் நம்ம சுவாமிநாதனில் ஒர்க் பண்ணுற ஸ்டாஃபுங்க எல்லாருமே ரொம்ப ஒத்துழைப்போட மக்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்திற்காக ரொம்பவே பயனுள்ள வகையில் எங்கள் பகுதியில் பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கோம். அடுத்ததாக பார்த்தீங்க அப்படின்னா இந்த ஆண்டு காலம் இந்த வருஷமே மா, புளி, அன்னாச்சி பழம், பலாப்பழம், முந்திரி இது போன்ற இங்கெல்லாமே நிறைய விளையும். இது எல்லாத்தையுமே கிட்டத்தட்ட ஒரு 500 டன்னுக்கு மேலே நேரடி வியாபாரம் செஞ்சு அவங்களுக்கு பணம் கிடைக்கிற அளவுக்கு நான் கம்பெனி பண்ணிக்கிட்டு இருக்கு. அடுத்ததாக வந்து எங்கள் பகுதியில் வந்து சுகாதாரம் சம்பந்தமான ஹெல்த் எஜுகேஷன் வந்து நான் கொடுத்துட்ருக்கேன். பார்த்தீங்கன்னா கர்ப்பிணி பெண்கள், பாலூட்டும் தாய்மார்கள், வளரிளம் பெண்கள் இவங்களை எல்லாத்தையுமே குரூப்பில் இருக்காங்க, அதாவது மகளிர் சுய உதவி குழுவில் எல்லாமே இருக்காங்க. அவங்களுக்கு வந்து ஹெல்த் எஜுகேஷன் வந்து கொடுத்துட்ருக்கோம். ஊட்டச்சத்து நிறைந்த உணவுகளை சாப்பிட்றது, இதனுடைய முக்கியத்துவம் என்ன அப்படிங்கிறத அவங்களுக்கு எடுத்து சொல்கிறதுல நாங்கள் பெரிதும் ஈடுபாடோடு இருக்கிறோம். அடுத்ததாக பார்த்தீங்கன்னா எங்கள் பகுதியில் வந்து முன்னெல்லாம் வந்து இப்போ நம்ம இதில் வந்து என்னென்னா கேழ்வரகு அரைக்கிற இயந்திரம் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க, கல் நீக்க இயந்திரம், கதிர் அடிக்கிற இயந்திரம் எல்லாமே கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. இதுக்கு முன்னாடி எல்லாமே வந்து ஒவ்வொரு வேலைகளையுமே செய்கிறது வந்து ரொம்ப கஷ்டமாக இருக்கும். அதாவது வந்து ஒரு கேவுரு அரைக்கணும், ஒரு கேழ்வரகு, ஒரு மாவு ஆக்கணும் அப்படின்னா கல்லில் தான் அதை வந்து க்ளீன் பண்ணுறத குத்தணும், அரைக்கணும். இதை வந்து சாப்பிட்றது வந்து அப்படியே ரொம்ப வந்து கடைபிடிக்கிறதே இல்லை. அதெல்லாமே இந்த அங்கே இருக்கிற பெண்களுடைய உடல் நலங்களை எல்லாம் கருதி இது எல்லாத்தையுமே குழுவுக்காக கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. எல்லாமே மானியமாக தான் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. எல்லாமே இன்னக்க வரையுமே எல்லாமே பயனுள்ள வகையில் பயன்படுத்திட்டு வந்துட்டுருக்காங்க. இது எல்லாத்தையுமே நானும் ஒரு தன்னார்வலராக எங்கள் பகுதியில் நான் வந்து பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கிறதுனால கடந்த மாதம் டெல்லியில் தேசிய அளவிலான அவார்டு வந்து எனக்கு கிடைச்சிருக்கு. எனக்கு கிடைச்சதுக்கு வந்து இந்த சாமிநாதன் ஆராய்ச்சி நிறுவனம் எனக்கு பெரிதாக உதவியாக இருந்தது. எனக்கு பேச வாய்ப்பளித்ததுக்கு மிக்க நன்றி கூறி விடைபெறுகிறேன். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
I'll just briefly translate what Vanilla has just spoke. She is a part of a self-help group, women in the Kolli Hills region, and the foundation has actually created enabling situation over there, linking with banks and saving habits and so on. It started like that, and over a period of time, the communities, they have mobilized seed banks that ensured seed exchange among them and seed multiplication and availability of quality seeds at the local level and so on. And also they have received support from the institution for reducing drudgery, particularly for women, through appropriate processing facility at the cluster level. That is also helped them. Eventually, whatever the surplus is available at the community, that also goes to market through value chain development and so on. And they have created formation of farmer producer organization with the over number of 1,000 families involved in that. That helps in terms of improving their livelihoods. They are engaged in different crops like millets, mango, jack, cashew, and in the last year they have more than 500 metric tons of agriculture produce that has gone to the market. And she is also involved in health education, rural health education, helped pregnant women and lactating mothers in prenatal and postnatal care and so on. And she is also a recipient of the farmers recent Farmer Innovation Award, Women Innovation Award from the ICR system 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Vanilla, for bringing the experiences from the Kolli Hills to this conference. We owe you more. Because you are a farmer, I was going to give you double the time, but you stopped halfway. I think we owe her a big congratulations for the award, Innovative Farmer Award 2024 from ICA. Congratulations. Thank you for the millet farmer story. And thank you for mobilizing communities to do the 4 R's, to do the simple interventions that we've heard about, but have a high impact. We are grateful for people like you. Thank you. Our final speaker for this session is Dr. Vijaya Kumar Mani, who is the co-founder and director of I Support Farming here in Chennai. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. So it's a deeply honored to speak here at international conference for hunger-free world organized by MS Swaminathan Foundation, and I represent a company called I Support Farming, working on a vision to make farming affordable and profitable so that everyone can get involved in agriculture. Right. So. And today's topic is empowering women, youth, smallholder farmers for food security, nutrition, and health in India. Right. So I come from a farming background. Right. So I've been a farmer for more than 35 years. Right. And as a family, we've been doing farming. And so I'll talk about the agriculture. So how can we empower women, youth, and the smallholder farmers in agriculture. Right. So I'm sure you know more than 18% of GDP is contributed by agriculture, right? And let's talk about empowering women in agriculture, right? So if you look at more than 80% of the rural women are getting involved in agriculture, right? And if we split that, around 33% are the farm laborers, and around 48% are the farmers, the small-owned farmers, right? But even though the extent is large, but they don't get the required support which is required. So what I'll talk about is what are the key initiatives which we can take so that we can empower these farmers, right? So first is the microfinance programs, right? If you look at to cultivate an acre of land, it costs only 25 to 30,000, right? Or maximum 50,000, right? So the farmers need just 35 to 40,000 per acre per season is what they require, right? But they don't have that 30 or 40,000. So because of that, what they do is they leave the land and they move to cities, right? So these microfinance programs provide the micro loans to the farmers, and so that they can get seeds or get new equipments, or even set up a small business, right? So these microfinance programs, and also the cooperatives and the self-help groups. Because if you look at I Support Farming, we also work with these small self-help groups and FPOs, where we when the women when they form a group, right, they have the better capacity to collectively they bargain the produce, or they get a good price for their produce, right? And last but not least, the training and education. Because here, if you look at when we as people from cities, so we always talk about the new initiatives, the new innovations like the drones or new technology. But whether has it really reached the last farm or the last mile farm? It does not, right? So what we need to do is we need to focus on programs where on the sustainable farming program practices or the financial literacy, so on and so forth, which we need to train and educate these women laborers or the women farmers. So if you look at, I'll give an example of the Deccan Development Society in Telangana, right, where they have promoted or they have empowered the lives of women entrepreneurs in Telangana district, where by providing them sustainable farming practices and giving them traditional seeds and other things. Right? So, and next, if you look at engaging youth in agriculture. So, if you look at the recent report by UN Food Agriculture Organization, out of the farmland of 616 million in 2020 will reduce to 272 million in 2100, which is a significant decrease in terms of the land parcel from 2020 to 2100, right? Because if you look at the major issue for the youth is the people from rural area, they move to cities in quest of the livelihoods, right? And what are the key initiatives which we can take? Is one is the entrepreneurship support, where the initiatives like agribusiness or incubators which offer mentorship or funding for the people or for the youths in the cities, also in the rural area, to set up agribusiness. And the technology integration. So like I said earlier, so the new technologies like drones or any new technology which has not reached the last mile, the rural area, so that we need to provide to these youth so that they don't move to cities. And again, educational programs to empower these youths who stay in the cities. And so if you look at the agri clinics and agri business centers schemes of NABARD, so they actually we are working with a lot of youths in the rural area where people get AC ABCs and then they're gonna get more benefited actually. And supporting the smallhold farmers, because I say these are the gold mines, because more than 80% of our farmers are small and marginal, right? So what are the strategic initiatives which we can take is, one is the government schemes like PM Kisan or PM Fasal Bima Yojana, which can give direct income to the farmers, right? And the public-private partnerships, so collaboration with between the governments, NGOs, and private companies provide modern tools and seeds and sustainable farming practices. And the last but not least, the market access, because the farmers, if you look at especially the smallholder farmers, right, they have challenges in the entire value chain. So right from the working capital to advisory or the farming practices, and end of the entire value chain, how to sell the produce, right? The market access is something which the farmers are not able to get. So what we do is we can form FPOs, right? Farmer produce organizations where and cooperatives where farmer can collectively sell the produce and can get a better margin or a better price for their produce. So if you look at the best example, like I would say, is the Amul, which I'm sure you all would know. So if you look at, like I said, the women, youth, and the smallholder farmers, right? And these can be empowered if we have the support from government agencies, NGOs, and the private and private sector. Together, we can create a more equitable and nourished India. Yeah, I think I'm done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Mani for that presentation highlighting the need to empower women because they are the majority in the rural areas where we want to make a difference. Microfinance is a must. Youth and agripreneurship and special interventions that will help us make a difference should be pursued. Our plan with this session was to save some time so that we can give you, the audience, an opportunity to ask questions and engage with the panelists. So we open up for questions. I've got one. I will take 5 and give a chance to the panel to respond. 2 rounds of 5, I think, will be good. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One more on this side. We stop at 4. Then I'll come to the other side. Over to you, Madam.
I've got two questions. The first one is to the first speaker, Uma ma'am. I just wanted to ask you about this infrastructure. See, ICDS, there's so many centers are there. But why is it that for the infrastructure alone, it has to take funds from MNRGS and so on? Because the philosophy of MNR Narega, if you look at, the community has to make the demand for the job. So why should the ICDS structures compete with other needs of the community? Why can't there be a separate allocation, budgetary allocation for buildings alone? If we look at it, started in 1975. And even now, we shouldn't be thinking of fans or electricity. We can't be, after 40 years, we can't be saying this. So that's one of the important things I wanted to ask. And when compared to health sector, because if you look at the health sector, they derive their buildings from other sources like PWD and so on. So why can't ICDS also draw upon various sources? Then secondly, there has to be a design for the building. It has to be a child-friendly space. The Rural Development Department thinks of it just as one kitchen and one this and runs away. But then for children to sit, to interact, and then for the play material, and there is special storage space and so on. So there has to be. So why can't there be a child-friendly design first developed, based on which that can become the. Of course, if you have a rented building, there's nothing. So on this issue of budgetary allocation, that's one question. And then the play material. Next is not just this, the play material, it's very important to make, because Mrs. Swaminathan constantly used to say, for 40 years I've been shouting, and she has told me, and once in a conversation she said, even if I am gone, if somebody is there to take it up, it would be nice. Because there is no budgetary allocation for play materials, and that's a consumable that has to keep coming up. Then the last one is that the nutrition issue has overtaken ECCE totally in ICDS, because ICDS now means it's nutrition, but ECCE is the major component which has taken a backseat. So these were the questions I had for the first speaker.
Thank you. We'll take all the questions, then I'll come to the panel. That way we move. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. I am Ananta Kumar Giri from the Madras Institute of Development Studies. Beginning with Mrs. Uma Mahadevan, very insightful indeed, but this focus on early childhood education also requires an integral approach in terms of pedagogy and learning. So that also needs to be interwoven. For example, how do we integrate a kind of open body growth to kind of the mythical and the mythologies and everything, you know. Secondly, just supplying the double-edged cooking, is it enough? Or alternatives like those people who are getting meal, how they become part of the cooking process. Because just providing a gas cylinder does not solve the problem of the burden of the already limited workers that are in the Anganwadis. Moving on, my second query is to Professor Nitya Rao. Indeed, the whole problem like this changing land pattern, now what kind of contestations are emerging? For example, when the land is going to the male folk, are there some critique of that? The issue of time poverty also needs to be looked in the context of what David Harvey calls a time-space compression. So how do we create processes of time-space expansion in a multiple way, not just structural time poverty, but what is the dimension of ontological time surplus that can be creatively created. My third query is to Dr. Mani, in terms of this microfinance for the small, farmers. Now, what kind of model are you using? Are you charging interest, or what kind of facilities you are creating for the marginal farmers?
Thank you, thank you. So we've got 6 questions now. There is no hope for the other side. Third speaker, please.
I'm very thankful also. Everything is social justification, gender equality. I thank to our chairman. Now he has become minority, Mr. Vijay. So, Mr. Vijay, I want one small question to you. You are doing wonderful work for giving agriculture products to be marketed through public-private partnership. The question about what happened because of climate change, sometimes there's an excess production is there. Disposal become a problem to everybody. Sometimes there is also a shortage because of various reasons like climate change or cyclonic storm, etc. How we are balancing so that the farmers can get the better benefit? That's what my question to Ms. Vijay. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a fourth one.
Good evening. I'm Santanam from Dan Foundation. Looks like all questions are targeted to ACS ma'am. I'm sure that she will be able to handle. Ma'am, coming to this ICDS, it has been several years back. It has started like what she said in 1975, and it has graduated over the years. I see the penetration of Anganwadis in a very positive manner, especially in the rural areas. 2 points I just wanted to get clarified. One is about the 6.5 working hours that you said. Has it been mandated all India, or is it happening only in Karnataka? That is one thing. Second thing, you also said about the CSR funding for the different aspects of the working of the AWCs. We find fancy corporates getting into traffic islands, this and that, on metro stations, painting it red and blue and naming their names. But I don't see any CSR support for Anganwadis per se. So we have also been interacting and working exclusively on the Anganwadis work. That is one thing. So how do you operationalize the CSRs to support Anganwadis? That is one thing. The third thing is, once the Anganwadi worker goes on leave, there is no alternate system wherein another lady, one of my Anganwadis, she went on a maternity leave. We found it extremely difficult to place an alternate. And another irony is, women-led panchayats, they are not so particular about Anganwadis. It's the irony that we have been facing. At least we wanted to model some of the women-led panchayats to have excellent Anganwadis so that others can replicate. But unfortunately, on the contrary, women-led Anganwadis performance is poor. Can you suggest any mechanism by which we can overcome this? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. As you can see, it's tough being an additional chief secretary to a government. You're under attack, but we all want to learn from you. So I'll give you 2 minutes to wrap up those 8 questions and tell us your story.
Thank you for these questions. They're all terrific. At the outset, I said that I was talking as a practitioner. I'm also an advocate for ICDS, but the roles are different. From the advocacy perspective, I don't disagree with you at all. I ask these questions to myself. Why should we be lobbying still 40 years after? Right? Why should there not be there is a separate budget, it's just that it doesn't have sufficient funds every year. There is a budget for Anganwadi buildings, it doesn't have sufficient funds for the requirements across the country. However, as a practitioner, it's also my job to solve the problem while I'm moving along. So that's where I say MG Narega is meant to provide not only labor but also community assets. And what is a community asset if an Anganwadi is not? Right? So Anganwadis are among the most asked for among all our people, and 8 lakhs of MG Narega can be provided with convergence to get a nice Anganwadi is the point that I was making. So from the advocacy perspective, totally agree, but also solving problems, MG Narega, problem of sites, using maybe school buildings, all of that is part of the solution. Play materials, totally agree, across all domains, we need play materials, we need good quality play materials, not cheap plastic play materials, and many states have started working on this. In fact, Sanjay Kaul and my report has an extensive section on early childhood education and why Anganwadis, rather than low-cost so-called preschools, are the way forward and should provide quality early childhood education. Nutrition, I agree that nutrition sometimes tends to take the entire space when we talk about Anganwadis. But for a country which has 35% stunting, I think it's important to ensure that nutrition gets the attention it deserves and gets the quality inputs that it deserves. Some of these problems are not only about the quantum or the amount of money that is spent in the cost norms. A part of it is. But a part of it is also the process. The ways in which materials are procured, the ways in which food is supplied. Different states have different solutions. Some states like Kerala have a very good solution using the Kudumbashri women's groups. There was a question about the integrated pedagogical approach which should be followed. Totally agree. It should be across all dimensions of learning for the child, for the early childhood. So in our report, we even looked at, while we were discussing our report, we looked at frameworks such as the Tewariki of New Zealand, other frameworks that were that are available across the world, and also a lot of innovative work being done by different civil society organizations in India. And that's been part of our recommendation. States like Karnataka do have pedagogy which has been developed called Chilipili, which is a joyful activity-based pedagogy. Happy to discuss more later. There was a question from Dhan Foundation on 6.5 hours. Not all over India. Different states have the mandate to increase or change the hours of their Anganwadi workings, because many states are topping up the remuneration of Anganwadi workers and helpers. But many states have increased. It's not only Karnataka. Many states have increased the working hours. Increase of working hours is very, very important to enable not only workforce participation, but as Nitya was pointing out, good quality feeding of children through the day. Because a child at the age of 3 or 4 is not going to eat just one meal. There's sprouts, there's milk, there's eggs, there's feeding through the day. On CSR funding, this is only one of the solutions that I suggested. There are different CSR organizations. Doing an outreach and doing a good connect with them is also an art, because sometimes it's being part of the government, I know how difficult it is to work with the government, and therefore making that process smoother on both sides is important. But it's only one of the solutions. MG Narega, MLA funds, MP funds, funds from the state budget, all are there. And finally, 2 questions about charge arrangements. Charge arrangements can be done. There is a small amount which is provided in the budgets, but states can top up. So this is what I meant, that we need to get into the details of how Anganwadi ICDS program is implemented. And there are many solutions that can be found at a reasonable cost, which doesn't dent the fiscal space too much. And finally, on women-led panchayats, that's where I don't agree with you. I'm sure your information is probably anecdotal. There's a lot of research actually going back to even Esther Duflo in 2004, which shows that women-led panchayats are certainly different in the kind of public goods they provide based on requirements within their panchayats. But there's much more that can be done by way of training women who are in panchayats, because they often find challenges that are not faced by their male counterparts. And that might be one of the parts of the problems.
Thank you. Good story in just 2 minutes. I hope the question sponsors are satisfied. All right, partly satisfied. We have a tea break, and we are going to continue the conversation. I now move to this other side. Any burning questions for our panelists?
I think there are some questions.
Yes, I want to just mop up some.
Yeah.
That's why I said 2 minutes. Let me just see if there are any, because we have to close in a few minutes. Yes, Mom, I see you. If there are no questions on this side, I'll take just one more, and that will be the close to the questions. And I'll go through all the panelists to give their responses and final words. Yes, madam. You don't have a mic?
Mr. Vijay Kumar, and the data that you said 616 million youth in 220 and 272 in 2100. That's a decline, isn't it?
Right,
you expect the population to age and less number of...
No, people from rural area, they will move to cities.
Okay, that's a difference. Number Vanilla Madam Koreori கேள்வி, நீங்க தனிப்பட்ட முறையில் உங்களோட வெற்றி கதையை பயணத்தை சொன்னீங்க, உங்களுக்கு நல்ல ஒரு அங்கீகாரமும் கிடைச்சதுன்னு. ஆனால் பொதுவாக பெண்களுக்குன்னு உங்களோட இந்த மாற்றங்கள்லாம் வந்தது இல்லையா, அந்த பண்ணுதல் இன்டர்வென்ஷனில் பெண்களுக்கு பொதுவாக அவங்களோட தரம், வாழ்க்கை தரம், அவங்களுக்கு இருக்கக்கூடிய இடம், ஸ்பேஸ், அந்த கம்யூனிட்டியில் அவங்க பேசக்கூடியது எல்லாம் அவங்களுக்கு கிடைச்சதா? ஈக்குவலாக ஸ்தானம் கிடச்சிதா? ஆண்களுக்கு ஈக்குவலாக அந்த மாதிரி எதானு இருக்கா? கலெக்டிவாக தனிப்பட்ட முறையில் இல்லாமல் பெண்களுக்கு குழுவாக கிடச்சிதா?
பெண்களுக்கு குழுவாக கிடைச்சது மேம். அதாவது பார்த்தீங்கன்னா, இப்போது எங்கள் பகுதியில் இருக்கிற பெண்கள் அன்றாடம் கூலி வேலைக்காக தான் போய் அதனுடைய வருமானத்தை எடுத்துப்பாங்க. இப்போது இந்த மிஷினரிஸ் எல்லாம் வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் தனிப்பட்ட முறையில் அவங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்திற்காக சிறு தொழில் ஆரம்பிக்கிறதுக்கு அவங்க சேமிப்பு பணத்தை சேமிப்பு பணம் போடுறதுக்காக அவங்களே இண்டிவிஜுவலாக பண்ணிகிட்ருக்காங்க. இதுக்கு வந்து ஆண்கள் வந்து சப்போர்ட்டிவாக தான் இருக்காங்க. ஏன்னா அந்த பகுதியிலேயே அந்த வேலைகள் எல்லாம் நடக்கிறதுனால சப்போர்ட்டிவாக தான் இருக்காங்க. பெண்களுக்கு வந்து நல்ல முன்னுரிமை கொடுத்து அங்கே அந்தந்த பகுதியிலே தான் நாங்கள் இருக்கோம். அந்த பகுதி விட்டு வெளியில் கொல்லிமலையிலே தான் இந்த மிஷினரி, அதாவது மதிப்பு கூட்டு பொருளாக தயாரிக்கிறது. இப்போ கேழ்வரகு இருக்குன்னா அதை மாவாக்கி அதை மதிப்பு கூட்டு பொருளாக தயார் பண்ணி அதை முறுக்கு, லட்டு இந்த மாதிரியான மதிப்பு கூட்டு பொருளாக தயாரிக்கிறது எங்கள் பகுதியிலேயே வந்து ட்ரைனிங் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க, பயிற்சி கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. இது சம்மந்தமாக நாங்கள் தஞ்சாவூர் போயிட்டு பயிற்சி எடுத்துகிட்டு வந்திருக்கோம். சர்டிஃபிகேட் எல்லாம் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க. எங்கள் பகுதியிலேயே நாங்களே பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கோம். அது நேரடி வியாபாரமாக கம்பெனி மூலமாகவே நாங்கள் நேரடி வியாபாரம் பண்ணிக்கிட்டே தான் இருக்கோம். அது கூட்டுறவு சொசைட்டி மூலமாகவே கவர்மெண்ட்டோடு சார்ந்து தான் இந்த வேலையை பண்ணிகிட்ருக்கோம். எங்களுக்கு இங்கே ஒர்க் பண்ணுற ஸ்டாஃப் வந்து எங்களுக்கு பயனுள்ள வகையில் எடுத்து சொல்கிறாங்க. ஆண்களையும் ஒருங்கிணைச்சி எடுத்து சொல்கிறாங்க. அவங்களும் ஓகே சொல்லிட்டாங்க மேம். தேங்க்யூ மேம்.
Who is going to help us with that one? Just a 30-second pitch. Yes.
No, I just asked her that hers was an outstanding example of empowerment. Whether has there been any collective empowerment of women in the community? No, she was just an example, but whether it's a collective empowerment. She said that there is to some extent collective empowerment because women have been given a lot of capacity building in terms of working with all these, using these machineries as well as in making value added provisions, with the result that they are thinking of saving individual savings, which is appreciated by the men in their community. So they are, also they get some kind of independence, So
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, my sister, Professor Nitya, will summarize what we've heard. But before we go there, I want to go back to my team.
You want to? No, I haven't answered their questions. Right. So, first on the microfinance question, right? So, at I Support Farming, what we do is, we take interest percentage from them. But it's not only the microfinance or the financing parts. We also help them in the production, productivity, and also we help them in selling the produce. So at I Support Farming, we work with the farmers in the entire value chain. So on the microfinance, we work with the NBFCs and the banks, and also we have P2P lending platforms. Actually.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go back to my charge. Do you want to say? I'll give you a chance to all say one thing that you didn't get to say. What is the one key message you want us all to remember about your presentation? Over to you.
You want me to start?
Yes.
Yeah, probably I was the only one who didn't have any questions, so I think I'll start that. What Vanilla was doing with her communities, what we are doing with the fisherwomen with whom I work with. So, though I'm sort of belong to a scientific organization, my work for 20 years has been mostly in the field, working with fisherwomen, and earlier on it was more prescriptive, but now it's more of learning, of co-creating, of understanding what they need, and trying to find solutions in a more, collaborative way, because I think there is a lot of knowledge and the traditional knowledge that is there within communities that we need to tap to really find solutions for the global challenges, but at the local level. So I think that is very, very important, and that has been my experience over the past 2.5 decades. So that one takeaway point is, again, gender is not just about women, it's about men and women, and we have to reach a point where there is gender equity and more social inclusion. And for that, we have to deal with all the intersectionalities that we have to face across when we are working with when we're working with communities across. So that's the one takeaway point that I would like to give here.
Thank you, Dr. Mani.
So one thing what I wanted to tell is the technology advancement, whatever is happening, that should reach the end farmer. So, and that will happen only if we do a collaborative way. And only if we have a partnership from private, public, and also the NGOs and stuff.
Thank you. Please explain to my sister Vanilla what we are asking from her on the other side.
ஒரு பாயிண்ட் உங்களுக்கு என்ன பண்ணுன்ட்டு
Please give her the mic. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we're talking about communities, this is something we discovered during the COVID pandemic, which is that the grassroots governance structures are the panchayats. And in Karnataka, for example, we have 95,000 plus elected local representatives, 50% of whom are women. And there are SC members, there are ST members, there are all communities represented there. This became a very powerful force during the COVID pandemic, especially during the lockdown, because they were taking the initiative, they were going house to house, understanding vulnerabilities, and they were showing leadership. So not just science-based awareness creation, but also running 11,000, 6,000 panchayats ran 11,000 institutional quarantine centers. That's in the first wave. And in the second wave, they ran isolation centers all through. Wow. They took up vaccination. And the interesting thing was, there was a World Bank study, a team did a study of MG Narega, employment generation during the pandemic. Where they compared two sets of panchayats, 150 panchayats where they were elected representatives, and 150 panchayats which in Karnataka were on a different track because they had some stay orders and they were on some administrators, bureaucratic administrators, and they found that there was 15% more generation of person days, 15% more employment had been created in the panchayats which had the elected representatives, which shows the capacity of responsiveness, which is all about very communities.
Good. Thank you very much to our speakers. I now hand over to my co-chair. We started 15 minutes late, and we are ending dead on time on our allocated time. 6 o'clock, you'll be out of here. Over to you, to Professor Rao.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll just quickly answer the one question on changing land patterns and what kind of contestation. And of course, this varies, so that I don't think there's one pattern. It depends on where we are, what kind of land holding. Is it scheduled tribe communities? I think in the previous session, we heard about biodiversity. I think there have been a lot of biodiversity hotspots which have actually, where land use has been shifted for other purposes. There's a lot of private sector coming in, and even though Mr. Vijay said that it's good to have PPP, actually we have to be a little bit careful when we are dealing with marginalized communities, because clearly the private sector has much more of wealth, much more of power, much more of resources than marginalized communities, so they are not equal. And I think when thinking about these partnerships, we do need to think about the power inequality. And I think it's good that he raised that point, because I think we kind of use these terms very easily without recognizing that we're actually taking away the power of communities. And I think for me, the takeaway, but also the summary in some sense that is coming is look for simple solutions, look for local solutions. People know what they want and how it can be done. And I think trying to do everything top down, or us trying to think that we are more educated and we can find the solutions, hasn't worked all these years. We really have to listen. We have to do simple things, simple ways of changing. I think Nikita mentioned the point about co-creation, which is very important, and I mentioned the point also about knowledge empowerment, that we talk about co-creation, but clearly we are again at very different levels of knowledge and education and insight. So how do we create a more level playing field in this process of co-creation? And I think Nikita and also Uma came up with strategies in terms of training, capacity building, also Vijay in terms of education, awareness building, training. So we're actually providing the knowledges and providing the opportunities, and then letting people decide what they would like to do, how they would like to move forward, and facilitate that process, whether it is 2 cylinders or whether it is whatever be it, simple or more complex. I think the whole issue of technology is really important, especially when we are dealing with excluded groups, because one of the big power inequalities has been that those who have the wealth or the money, including in the urban middle class, we may have facilities for drudgery reduction, whether it's a washing machine, whether it's a cooker, whether it's something else, but the rural women still have to do all these tasks by hand. They have to go long distances to collect water, to collect fuel, and so on. So I think the role of technology in terms of also trying to empower and create a level playing field is quite important. So I don't want to take up much more time, but I'll hand it back to you to close. Thank you.
I want to believe we've done justice to the subject of empowering women, empowering smallholder farmers, empowering the fisher folk, and empowering the youth. As I said, we have a tea break. We can pursue the discussion then. But allow me to thank our presenters who have prepared adequately, to thank our rapporteurs and our conveners and my co-chair. Thank you for an excellent session.
And I think the conveners just wanted to make an announcement. I forgot that they wanted to hand over this millet bag to each of the speakers. Thank you. Probably.
Token of love and appreciation.
We'll give her also. They have produced this in the bag. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, breaking for high tea. 6:30 is